She stood alone on the road with her hands shaking. The sound of wheels faded, then vanished. Eliza Moore stared after the stagecoach as if her will alone could call it back. It didn't slow, it didn't turn. And in that quiet moment she understood something terrible. She had been left behind. Her bag was gone, her ticket was gone. Her future was riding away without her. The heat pressed in. Her chest tightened. And one thought rose above the fear, sharp and unanswered. What happens to a woman when no one comes back for her? Eliza swallowed and forced herself to breathe. Panic would not help her now. Nothing ever had. She stood in the middle of the hard-packed road, bonnet pulled low, dust clinging to the hem of her travel dress. The sun hovered high, unforgiving, as if it had no patience for mistakes. She turned in a slow circle, taking in the empty land stretching in every direction. Scrub brush. Distant ridges. Heat shimmering like a cruel trick of the eyes. She had stepped away for minutes. Just minutes. The driver had promised 15. Eliza pressed her lips together and refused to cry. She checked her pockets again, though she already knew what she'd find. A small coin purse with a few dollars. A folded letter offering her a teaching position in Copper Flats. Nothing else. No water. No bag. No protection. She squared her shoulders. She had crossed half the country alone. She had buried both parents before 22. She had learned early that waiting for rescue was a luxury she could not afford. She started walking. Each step felt louder than the last. Her boots were sturdy but already rubbing her heels raw. The sun crawled higher, and her throat grew dry. She stayed in the center of the road where the ground was firm, where tracks meant others passed this way. She told herself someone would come. She told herself it would be soon. The sound reached her before she dared hope. Hooves. Eliza stopped and turned, heart hammering. A single rider approached from behind at an easy pace. Not rushing, not cautious, just steady. She lifted her chin and waited. The man pulled his horse to a halt, several feet away. He did not crowd her, did not reach for anything. He sat tall in the saddle, hat shading his eyes, dust coating his clothes like a second skin. "Ma'am," he said, touching the brim of his hat. His voice was calm. "You look like you could use some help." Relief hit her so fast it nearly knocked her over. "The stagecoach," Eliza said. The words scraped her throat. "It left me. I stepped away. They didn't wait." The man's jaw tightened. He swung down from his horse with easy grace, keeping his distance. That's a hard road to be stranded on. His eyes were blue, clear, not curious in the wrong way. "My name's Caleb Hart," he said. "I've got a small place a few miles back. I was headed toward Red Mesa when I saw you." "Eliza Moore," she replied. "I meant to be going to Copper Flats. I have a teaching position there." Caleb glanced down the road, then back at her. "That's a long walk, especially today." She nodded. She already knew. He reached into his saddlebag and offered her a canteen. "Drink." Slow. She hesitated only a second before taking it. The water was warm and tasted like salvation. She forced herself not to gulp. When she handed it back, their fingers brushed. He didn't linger. "My place isn't much," he said. "But it's shelter. You can rest, eat. Tomorrow I'll take you into Red Mesa. You can catch the next stage." Eliza studied his face. She had learned how to read men. This one did not press, did not soften his offer with promises. He simply waited. "I don't have much money," she said. "I didn't ask for any." "Why?" The question slipped out. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Something passed through his eyes. "Because leaving you out here would be wrong." She nodded once. Decision made. "All right," she said. "Thank you." He helped her into the saddle, settling her in front of him. He kept his hands steady on the reins, his posture careful. The horse moved at a gentle walk. They rode in silence for a while. The land rolled past, quiet and wide. Eliza became aware of the warmth at her back, solid and reassuring. "You come from far east?" he asked. "Pennsylvania," she said. "There wasn't much left for me there." Quote, "I understand that. They crested a low rise, and Caleb pointed ahead. A small ranch lay tucked into a shallow draw, a cabin, a barn, corrals with horses lifting their heads at the sound of hooves. "It's simple," he said, "but it's home." Eliza felt something loosen in her chest. It looked strong. His shoulders eased. Inside the cabin, the air was cool and clean, sparse, but cared for. Caleb built up the fire, set coffee to heat, and cooked a simple meal. He moved like a man used to doing things for himself. They ate at the small table. Eliza realized how hungry she had been only when her hands stopped shaking. "You can have the bed," Caleb said. "I'll take the barn." "I can't." "You can," he said gently, "and you will." That night, Eliza lay beneath rough blankets, listening to the quiet. She had never felt so exhausted or so safe. In the barn, Caleb stared up at the rafters, listening to the horses breathe. He told himself this was nothing. Just a decent thing done. Still, he found himself hoping morning would take its time. They laughed at her dreams of a better life. The cowboy built that life with her. Eliza woke before dawn, unsure at first where she was. Then the quiet came back to her. The solid walls. The faint smell of wood smoke. She sat up slowly, listening. Outside, a rooster crowed. Hooves shifted in the corral. Somewhere nearby, a bucket clinked against wood. Life, already moving. She dressed quickly, smoothing her travel skirt, pinning her hair beneath her bonnet. The borrowed nightshirt lay folded on the chair. She hesitated, then folded it neatly and set it aside, a small sign of respect. When she stepped outside, the air was cool and pale with early light. Caleb stood near the corral, brushing a chestnut mare with long, practiced strokes. He looked up when he heard her boots on the porch. "Morning," he said. "Good morning," Eliza replied. "I hope I didn't oversleep." "You didn't." "Coffee's almost ready." They ate together in the quiet cabin, the morning easing something between them. Caleb didn't rush, didn't pry. He asked simple questions. And when she answered, he listened. By the time they saddled the horse, the sun was already climbing. The ride to Red Mesa took hours. They spoke of small things at first, where she'd learned to teach, how long he'd had the ranch, what the land was like through the seasons. "I saved for years to buy this place," Caleb said. "It's not big, but it's mine." "I think that matters more than size," Eliza said. He glanced at her then, surprised, and nodded. Red Mesa appeared in the distance by mid-afternoon, a cluster of buildings clinging stubbornly to the land. Saloons, a hotel, a stage office, noise, movement, eyes that turned toward them as they rode in. The clerk at the stage office barely looked up when Caleb asked about the next coach. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "No exceptions." Eliza felt her shoulders sink. Another night, another expense she hadn't planned for. "I'll walk you to a boarding house," Caleb said. "Make sure it's decent." She didn't argue. Mrs. Landry's place was clean and strict, and Eliza felt relief when the woman approved of her at once. The room was small but tidy. When Eliza reached for her purse, Caleb gently stopped her. "Let me." "I can't keep letting you." "You can," he said quietly. "And you will." They stood awkwardly in the hallway afterward, neither quite ready to say goodbye. "If Copper Flats doesn't work out," Caleb said, his voice low, "you can come back to the ranch. No questions." Eliza took the small slip of paper he offered, her fingers trembling. "Thank you." That night, alone in the boarding house bed, she stared at the ceiling and wondered why leaving him already felt like loss. 3 weeks passed. Caleb worked harder than ever, fixing fence, breaking a young colt, repairing the roof of the barn. But his thoughts wandered. He caught himself listening for hoofbeats that weren't there. When a rider finally appeared one afternoon, dust trailing behind her, hope surged before sense could stop it. The woman dismounted stiffly. "Are you Caleb Hart?" "I am." She handed him a letter. "From Eliza Moore. She asked me to deliver it if I passed this way." His hands weren't steady as he opened it. She wrote of Copper Flats, of the school, of the children, of how rough the town could be. And then, gently, she wrote of him, of gratitude. of loneliness, of wondering. Caleb read it twice, then a third time. "She doing all right?" he asked the woman. "As well as she can," came the honest reply. That was enough. He arranged care for the ranch, packed his good clothes, rode out before dawn. Copper Flats was louder than Red Mesa, rougher. Men stopped and stared openly when Caleb walked beside Eliza through town, his presence unmistakable. When she saw him standing in the doorway of the schoolhouse, her breath caught. "You came," she said. "I said I would." She laughed then, a sound halfway to tears. They talked late into the evening. About the town, about the ranch, about fear and wanting more than survival. "I can't leave yet," Eliza said quietly. "My contract." "I know," Caleb said. "I won't ask." He reached for her hand, slow enough that she could pull away. She didn't. His presence changed things. Men who had lingered too close learned to keep their distance. Whispers followed them, but Caleb didn't flinch. He attended church, helped repair the schoolhouse steps, let people see he was staying. Still, the tension lingered. "You shouldn't have to face this alone," Caleb said one evening as they sat on the schoolhouse bench. "I won't always be alone," Eliza replied. "That's the point of this, of all of it." He nodded. "Then let me walk beside you, not ahead, not in the way." She leaned into his shoulder, just slightly. "All right." When he finally rode away days later, leaving felt harder than arriving. They wrote every week, letters filled with work and weather and waiting, with longing kept careful but alive. 8 months later, Eliza's final letter came with 3 simple words underlined twice. "I am ready." Caleb read them standing in the doorway of his cabin, the wind moving through the grass, his heart pounding with a joy so fierce it left him breathless. He saddled the horse. This time he wasn't riding to rescue. He was riding to build a life. Caleb reached Red Mesa 3 days before the stage was due. He told himself it was practical. There were supplies to gather, arrangements to make. Still, every hour felt stretched thin, as if time itself had decided to test his patience one last time. He stayed at the small hotel near the depot, rising before dawn each morning, pacing the wooden floor until the clerk gave him a look of mild concern. By the second day, even the horses seemed to sense his restlessness. On the afternoon, the stage was expected. The sky hung wide and cloudless. Dust drifted along the road long before the coach appeared. Caleb stood outside the station, hat in hand. The coach rolled in slowly. One man climbed down, then another. Then a woman stepped into view. Eliza. Travel-worn, bonnet crooked, eyes searching. They saw each other at the same time. She laughed, breathless, as she hurried toward him. He didn't wait. He crossed the distance in 3 long strides and caught her as she stumbled off the last step. "You're here," she said, voice shaking. "I told you I would be." She pressed her face into his chest for just a moment. Then she pulled back, embarrassed, smiling through tears. "Take me home." He nodded. "Our home." They rode out before sunset, her trunk loaded onto a borrowed wagon behind them. The road felt different this time, lighter, full of plans instead of uncertainty. Caleb pointed out changes as they rode. The new fence line, the young cottonwoods he'd planted. The second room added to the cabin. Eliza listened, hand resting lightly against his arm, imagining herself there. Not as a guest, not as someone passing through, but as someone who belonged. When the ranch came into view, she drew in a sharp breath. "You did all this," she said softly. "We did," Caleb corrected. "Just took you a little longer to arrive." That night they kept their distance, sat at the table, talked, planned, laughed in small, quiet ways. Sleep came slowly. The next morning dawned clear. They rode back to town together, where a small gathering waited at the church. A minister, 2 witnesses, no fuss. Eliza wore a simple white dress she'd bought in Red Mesa. Caleb stood straighter than he ever had in his life. When they spoke their vows, there was no hesitation, no doubt. Marriage changed things. And didn't. The work was still hard, the days still long, but now there were two sets of hands, two voices at the table, two shadows stretching across the porch at sunset. Eliza learned the rhythms of the ranch. She rose early, learned to cook over fire, learned the moods of the horses. Caleb watched her with quiet pride as she spoke gently to skittish colts. Steady and patient, she brought order to the books, sent letters, kept records, asked questions that made him think. "You don't have to soften yourself for me," she told him one evening when he hesitated before speaking his mind. "I'm not," he said. "I'm learning how to share it." They argued sometimes, about money, about time, about risk, but they always came back to the table, always talked it through. The ranch began to grow, not fast, but steady. Winter came hard that first year. Snow piled against the cabin walls. Wind howled through the valley. They spent long evenings by the fire, Eliza reading aloud while Caleb mended tack. One night, as the fire burned low, she set the book aside. "Caleb," she said quietly. He looked up. "I think I might be expecting." The world went very still. He crossed the room in 2 steps and knelt in front of her, hands resting uncertainly on her knees. "Are you sure?" quote. She nodded. He laughed then, a sound full of wonder and fear. He pressed his forehead to her stomach, as if listening for something only he could hear. "We'll figure it out," he said. "All of it." They did. The months that followed were filled with caution and hope. Eliza tired easily. Caleb watched her like a hawk. Neighbors offered advice whether asked or not. The baby arrived on a clear autumn night. A boy, loud, healthy. Caleb wept openly when they placed the child in his arms. "Our son," Eliza whispered. "They named him Thomas." Years passed. 2 daughters followed. The cabin grew small. A larger house rose in its place, built board by board. The ranch expanded. Hired hands came and went. The name Hart became known beyond the valley. Eliza taught their children at the kitchen table. Reading, numbers, history. Caleb taught them horses and land and patience. At night, when the house was quiet, they sat together on the porch. "You ever think about that road?" Caleb asked once. Eliza smiled. "Every day." She leaned into him, watching their children play in the yard. "They laughed at my dreams once. Told me they were foolish." He kissed the top of her head. "They were wrong." She looked at the life around them, the land, the family, the man beside her. "No," she said softly, "they were." They sat in silence, the stars coming out one by one. Neither of them noticed the dust rising on the far road. Not yet. The dust on the far road meant trouble. Caleb saw it first the next morning while mending a fence line. A slow rising cloud where no rider should have been. Too wide. Too deliberate. He straightened, hand resting on the post, eyes narrowed. By the time the wagon crested the ridge, Eliza was already at the door with Thomas on her hip. 2 men rode ahead of it. A third drove. Caleb walked out to meet them before they reached the house. "You Hart?" the lead rider asked. "That's right." The man smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it. "Name's Wilkes. I'm here about land." Caleb folded his arms. "This land isn't for sale." Wilkes shrugged. "Everything's for sale." Behind Caleb, Eliza stood still. She didn't retreat inside. She didn't hide. She watched. Wilkes's gaze flicked past Caleb to her, lingered, then back. "Nice place you've built," he said. "Shame if things got difficult." Caleb took 1 step forward. His voice stayed level. "You've said what you came to say. Now you can leave." The men exchanged looks. Wilkes's smile thinned. "Think on it. Folks with growing families ought to be careful." They turned and rode off, the wagon rumbling behind them. The dust hung long after they were gone. That night, Eliza sat at the table after Thomas was asleep, hands folded tight. "They were trying to scare us," she said. "Yes." "Will it work?" Caleb met her eyes. No. But he lay awake long after she slept, listening to the land, calculating. The pressure didn't come all at once. It came in small things. a fence cut in the night, a water trough drained, a hired hand who quit suddenly, unwilling to say why. Rumors in town, prices raised without reason. Caleb handled it quietly, fixed what was broken, paid what he must, said little. Eliza noticed everything. "You don't have to carry this alone," she said one evening as she handed him a ledger. "I know." "Then let me help." He hesitated, then nodded. They planned together, adjusted routes, shifted grazing, made alliances. Eliza wrote letters, asked questions, remembered names. Slowly, the pressure eased. Wilkes did not return. Time moved forward again. The children grew. Thomas followed Caleb everywhere. The girls learned early how to ride and how to read people. Eliza's reputation spread beyond the ranch. Neighbors sought her advice. Town meetings listened when she spoke. "She's smarter than half the men there," someone once muttered. Caleb only smiled. One spring, Thomas fell ill. Fever, too high, too fast. Caleb rode through the night for the doctor. Eliza sat by the bed, cooling her son's skin, whispering calm she did not feel. Thomas lived, but the fear stayed. After that, nothing felt guaranteed. Years later, when Thomas was nearly grown, he announced his plan at supper. "I want to study animals," he said, "properly, learn to heal them." Caleb set his fork down slowly. "That's a long road." "I know." Eliza reached across the table and squeezed her son's hand. "We'll help you." And they did. They helped the girls follow their own paths, too. One stayed close. One married far away. Letters came. Visits followed. The ranch changed hands gradually. Caleb taught. Stepped back. Watched. One evening, long after the children were grown, Eliza and Caleb sat on the porch again, the same place where so many years had passed. "My dreams were small once," Eliza said softly. "Just safety, just purpose." Caleb took her hand. "You built more than that." She smiled. "We did." The land lay quiet around them, secure, earned, and for the first time in a long while, there was no dust on the road. The house felt too quiet after Thomas left. Eliza noticed it first in the mornings. No boots by the door, no chair scraped back in a hurry, no questions shouted across the room, just space where sound used to live. Caleb noticed it at night. He sat longer on the porch after supper, staring out across the land as if waiting for something to move. Some nights, he didn't speak at all. Thomas had ridden east with a borrowed wagon and a head full of plans. Veterinary school. Proper training. A life that reached beyond the ranch. "I raised him to go," Caleb had said the morning they said goodbye. "Doesn't make it easier." Eliza leaned into him now, years later, as the sun dipped low. It was always the point. They watched the light fade in comfortable silence. Time reshaped itself again. The girls married, returned with children of their own. Laughter came back to the house in bursts and seasons. Then it left again. Eliza's hair silvered. Caleb's hands stiffened in the cold. He moved slower, chose his steps more carefully. One winter, he fell from a horse. Not hard, not dramatic, but hard enough. Eliza knelt beside him in the snow, heart pounding. "Don't move." Quote, "I'm all right," he said through clenched teeth. He wasn't. The doctor came. The healing was slow. Some things never quite returned to how they had been. Caleb adapted, took on lighter work, watched more, guided instead of doing. It frustrated him. Eliza saw it in the way he lingered at the window, the way he rubbed his hands together as if trying to wake strength that wasn't there anymore. "You still matter," she said one evening, laying her hand over his. "In every way that counts." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Thomas returned in the spring, taller, surer, carrying knowledge like a second skin. He moved through the barn with confidence, spoke to animals as if they understood him. "They do," Eliza whispered to Caleb as she watched. The ranch shifted again. Roles changed. The work continued, Illness came quietly, a cough that lingered, fatigue that didn't lift. Days when Eliza needed to rest more often. Caleb noticed before she admitted it. "You should see the doctor," he said gently. "I will," she replied. She did. The answer was not sudden, not dramatic, just honest. They sat together on the bed that night, holding hands. "How much time?" Caleb asked. Eliza smiled sadly. "Enough." He bowed his head. "I'm not ready." She lifted his face. "You were never meant to be." They walked the land together whenever they could, slow paths, familiar turns. "You remember the road?" Eliza asked one afternoon. "The day the stage left me." "I remember thinking I was too late," Caleb said. "Then I saw you." "You didn't rescue me," she said. "You chose me." "So did you." They sat on the porch again as dusk settled. "I would do it all again," Caleb said. "So would I," Eliza replied. "Every hard moment, every mile." She rested her head against his shoulder, lighter now, smaller. He held her, as if memory alone could keep her there. The morning she didn't wake, the house was still. Caleb sat beside her long after the sun rose, her hand in his, the quiet pressing in. Thomas came. The girls came. They cried together. Caleb did not. He stood on the porch that night alone, the land stretching out before him, empty, but not broken. Months passed. Life adjusted. It always did. Caleb kept walking, kept tending, kept sitting on the porch at sunset. One evening, Thomas joined him. "She built something that will last," Thomas said. Caleb nodded. "She built me." He looked out at the ranch, the house, the land, the life they had made. And for the first time since she'd gone, the ache softened. Just a little. Caleb lived another 7 years. People said he was strong. Said the land kept him going. Said routine saved him. All of that was partly true. But what truly carried him was memory. Every morning he rose before the sun. He brewed coffee the way Eliza liked it, out of habit more than need. He sat at the table where her chair remained untouched. Sometimes he spoke to it. Sometimes he didn't. The ranch no longer needed his strength, but it still needed his presence. Thomas had taken over most of the work. The horses trusted him. The hands respected him. The name on the gate remained Hart, and that mattered. "You don't have to come out every day," Thomas told him once. Caleb smiled faintly. "I know, but I want to." Quote. So he did. The grandchildren grew. They ran the same paths Eliza once walked, asked questions she would have loved. Learned stories Caleb told slowly, carefully, as if choosing each word mattered. "Tell us about the road," one of them asked one evening. Caleb looked out toward the horizon. "Which one?" "The dusty one," the child said. "The one that started everything." Caleb breathed out through his nose, almost a laugh. "There was a woman standing there," he began, braver than she knew, tired, alone, and she didn't ask for saving. The children leaned closer. She just needed someone to come back. As the years passed, Caleb grew quieter. He walked more slowly, rested more often. His hands shook sometimes when he poured coffee. Thomas noticed. So did the girls. "You can come live with us," one of them offered gently. Caleb shook his head. "I'll stay where she stayed." They understood. One autumn evening, the sky turned the same deep gold it had been on the night Eliza once spoke of dreams on the porch. Caleb sat in his chair, blanket over his knees. The land was quiet. He closed his eyes. And for a moment, it felt like she was beside him again. "You were right," he whispered. "They laughed, and they were wrong." The house creaked softly behind him. The wind moved through the trees he had planted for her. Caleb slept in that chair that night, and did not wake. They buried him beside Eliza under the cottonwoods. The entire valley came. Men who had once doubted him. Women Eliza had helped. Children who carried their lessons forward. Horses stood quiet in the corrals, as if sensing something final. Thomas spoke last. My father once told me he wasn't a man who offered much, he said, but he offered consistency, respect, and the courage to build instead of walk away. He looked at the two graves. They built something that outlived them. Years later, the ranch still stood. It expanded and changed, but the heart of it remained the same. The old porch, the cottonwoods, the road that cut through the land like a scar turned blessing. People told the story differently depending on who they were. Some said it was fate, some said it was kindness, some said it was just good luck. But the truth lived in the quiet details. A man who turned back, a woman who chose to stay. Two people who believed a better life could be built by hand. On warm evenings, Eliza's great-grandchildren played near the porch while the older ones listened to the story again. "And then what?" one of them asked. Thomas smiled. "Then they lived." The child frowned. "That's it?" Quote, "That's everything," he replied. The road still stretched out beyond the ranch. Dust still rose now and then when wagons passed. But no one standing there anymore was truly alone. Because long ago, a lonely cowboy had chosen to ride back. And in doing so, he built a life that never truly ended. If you felt this tale in your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Archives of the Wild West, where every story rides through the dust, the danger, and the kind of love that never dies. See you in the next tale, partner.